pod bay doors, please, Hal.
The communist conspiracy is a deliberate and predictable plan of action to subvert the world.
There are those who ask why this responsibility should be ours. The answer, I think, is simple. There is no one else who can do the job.
We began to feel the sense of a world power, that possibly we could control the future of the world.
We don't see the end of the tunnel, but I must say I don't think it's darker than it was a year ago, in some ways lighter.
Throughout the war in Vietnam, the United States has exercised a degree of restraint unprecedented in the annals of war.
The Lakme American.
500,000 of them in Vietnam. And this war became a war of genocide.
Dressed up to win, we're dressed up to win, dressed up for victory.
You think it's worth it?
Yeah, I don't know. They say we're fighting for something. I don't know.
Americans say the Vietnamese are just slant-eyed savages. The Vietnamese have 5,000 years of history. We fight against the invaders. It is not we who are the savages.
I know very little about it over there, I'll tell you. And the less I know, the better off I'll be. I don't even know who we're fighting for over there, to be real honest with you. I think we're fighting for the North Vietnamese, ain't we?
How did I feel when the war was over? I felt real good. And that was our number one ambition. That was what we really wanted, was to win this war. It took us a long time, so when it's finally over, when we knew that we had won, we felt great. We really felt great.
I think Americans have worked extremely hard not to see the criminality their officials and their policymakers have exhibited.
Make no mistake about it. We are going to win.
The history of conflict among nations does not record another such lengthy and consistent chronicle of error as we have shown in Vietnam.
The Vietnamese fight only in self-defense. Ultimately, the Americans will see the light. If not, they will defeat themselves.
When the going gets tough, get going. Because winners never quit, and quitters never win.
We must be ready to fight in Vietnam, but the ultimate victory will depend upon the hearts and the minds of the people who actually live out there.
Be happy, smile, everything isn't bad.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and OverthinkingOscars.wordpress.com. Sitting here with my anti-war co-host, a critic, dare I say legend, from TalkMovieMe.com, Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
The question used to be, might it be possible that we're on the wrong side in the Vietnam War? But we weren't on the wrong side. We are the wrong side.
Yes. Welcome to a very quickly made...
Listen, I just said this to you, but the next time you want to pick something this intense, give me more than 4 days, okay? We're recording on a Monday. He tells me on Thursday, hey, we're doing let's do Hearts and Minds. It's like, oh, the Vietnam documentary from '74? Yeah. Oh yeah, great. That's great. That's great. I had never seen it before.
I've seen it twice. I have the Criterion, and I'll get into my first time seeing it in a second. I just want to say this: the reason that I pulled this out of my hat was because.
You sure it was your hat? Because it.
Well,
it seemed a little more random than that.
The reason that I picked this, we are sitting here. We are 5 days away from, or 5 days past the inauguration of Joe Biden, which followed 3 months of the biggest bit of insanity that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. That culminated on January 6th with the insurrection and sacking of the Capitol for 6 hours.
Say what you want about the anti-war movement in the 60s, they never busted into the Capitol.
Yeah, no, they didn't. They didn't do that.
Easily
In fact,
could have.
no one ever has.
Did you see it? They easily could have. Did you see how many people were on the mall in Washington in that footage in the movie?
Yeah, did you see the ones that were on the Senate chamber steps?
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was like 400 people there, but they were peacefully protesting.
They
Which
could
is
have
why
been.
they were probably met with a whole lot of force, whereas
Right.
the white supremacists were just basically allowed to walk in.
Right.
Chanting, hang Mike Pence, kill Pelosi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I'm doing this is that watching this movie, I keep thinking it could have been so much worse. Because
Yeah.
the whole arena of the Vietnam era was just this giant eruption of values, of morality, of just things we'd never seen in this country, probably not since the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost expected the last 4 years to breed that. The breaking in of the Capitol on January 6th was a microcosm of what the last 4 years could have been.
And in some cases, in some areas, kind of what it was. I mean, Michigan, this summer, their capital was overrun.
Right.
With people with guns, and they took it over. They have not been charged, as far as I know, with insurrection and sedition. Unlike the people who stormed the nation's capital, who the FBI is tracking down every single last one of them, and charging them with insurrection. So how, and this is going to give me more pleasure than just about anything I'll say today. Former President Trump, ex-president, he got impeached for the second time over this, and he whipped the whole thing up. If the FBI is investigating insurrection, it's going to be hard for Trump to beat without Republican corruption. A conviction.
And a lot of people kept saying to me, why are they going through with impeachment procedures 5 days before he's about to exit the White House? And my answer was always, they want to glue that to his legacy.
That, and there was a push, because all that happened and because he's being held responsible for it. A lot of people were like, okay, he's too dangerous to continue to be in power.
Right.
So they were hoping that they could push the trial through and get him removed from office before the inauguration.
But if you're working...
Now, the reason that they're going to keep doing it and going ahead with the trial, other than the fact that it's a constitutional responsibility, is that there's a part of the 14th Amendment that if he's convicted and they do another vote, the Senate can bar him from ever holding public office ever again, ever running for public office ever again, which is the ultimate goal, to prevent him from ever being the strongman dictator that he wanted to be.
But if you're part of that process, you'd want to be the person who just has to glue it to his legacy of being the first person to be impeached twice.
The first president to be impeached twice, and the only president to be impeached in their first term.
Right.
2 times. Right. Twice in one term? They didn't even do that to Andrew Jackson. I mean, come on. Right. He was the most racist president we ever had, and somehow he managed to get into a second term Before
That was
they
Andrew Johnson.
before they impeached him for incompetence, which was basically what they impeached him for.
Right.
Incompetence.
They were with Andrew Johnson.
Yeah.
Just, it's just, it's a reminder to me that the arsenal of democracy is fallible. It's not perfect. You can wave all the flags you want to, but it's never going to be perfect. As long as our democracy is run by human beings and falls victim to the machinations of greedy little men, it's never going to be perfect.
No, and it's perfection is overrated.
Yeah, it is.
What was it? Benjamin Franklin once said he was asked by someone, well, do we have a monarchy or a republic? And he says it's a republic if you can keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the struggle was. And where you pick up the movie Hearts and Minds, 1974, we're still in Vietnam at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Not for much longer, but it's odd, it's rare that a documentary was made about this kind of stuff back then.
It's very rare, but I don't know if you got this, because the movie is never about one thing.
No.
There are a splintering of points of view. It's not the war is bad, we're right. It's all these different. There's no narrator. It's told from varying points of view, from officials, from veterans, from families of veterans, from the Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
That was unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. That they were actually like talked to and treated as humans, because God forbid we should think of people as people.
Yeah. Not some collective of backwards
primitive people, as the one the one guy says.
I had a very hard time figuring out how to feel about this movie. The first time I saw it, and the second time was a little clearer, but it's indicative of how people thought about it, because you couldn't get two people on the same page generally, because you have there's a lot of people talking in this movie. There's a lot of interviews in this, and I don't think two of them are exactly the same.
No.
That's a very interesting approach, because it could have been just, like I say, it could have been just one thing.
Well, yeah, it could have been talking head after talking head about how bad it all was. What I loved about it was that even when they're presenting government officials' official bullshit line,
mm-hmm.
they cut it into the film in a place where you can see, or it's just following or just ahead of, the exact opposite of everything they just said.
Right.
So it's taking these official lines, not challenging them while they're being said.
No.
And kind of Eisenstein montaging why what they just said was never true.
That is, nowhere is that more true than the way the movie ends, because it ends with a monologue by General Westmoreland.
Yeah, with a whole lot of racism.
And talking about the Oriental believes that life is cheap, does not value life the same way that the Westerner does.
Yeah,
that is
back when they were still allowed where they still
That-
called people from there.
That is offset with the aftermath of the Christmas bombings.
Yeah.
In which this man is mourning the death of his daughter, and it's like...
And his mother and his other children, but he's my 8-year-old daughter is dead. Take this shirt. Take her shirt. This was her favorite shirt. She can never wear this shirt again. Throw it at Richard Nixon. And tell him who it belonged to. It's like, God damn.
Yeah. Tell me he's not thinking.
Whew.
Tell me tell me he thinks life is cheap. I mean, it's just fascinating. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, it's all these things that the military has always done to demonize the other side. You know, the Germans, I think at some point, Americans were told that the Germans were eating babies.
Well, and the Japanese were told that we would eat their children.
Right.
You know, as much as we like to call World War II the good war.
There's no such thing.
Watch Apocalypse 45, that documentary. Watch that documentary.
That was a
tell me that nobody, you know, tell me that there's not different sides to the war. Yeah. What's interesting to me, and I never thought about this, this never occurred to me until now, is that this whole Vietnam War was run by people who were there during World War II, who either fought in it, got caught up in the war effort, and saw it in those clear-cut terms.
Well, the Vietnam conflict started under Eisenhower. The general commander of the Allied forces. Yeah, and ended under Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president.
Right. And we fled Vietnam in chaos. And nobody wanted to think about that. When the war ended, when the peace treaty was signed, nobody gave a damn.
No.
It was on the news, but, you know, it was like everybody was so tired of it by that point. And it was just, you know, the economy was doing fine, you know, and nobody really cared about it anymore. And the funny thing is, and see, the thing is, when it comes to any kind of historical event, I always try to take a step back and look at the larger picture. And in this case, I kept thinking, the simplistic term that I put it under was, everyone knew it was wrong. Everybody knew it was wrong. Except the people who were running it.
Yeah.
Everybody kept saying, end this. You're not getting, you're going nowhere. You're doing nothing but throwing money and bodies at a cause that you cannot win.
I think I think the worst president for all of that was Johnson. Johnson could have come out and changed course and, you know, said, okay, well, let's work on helping them actually build a country instead of, you know, or let's help them clean up our mess and get out of there. But he doubled down. He tripled down. He sent how many soldiers? He was responsible for that massive influx of soldiers.
And then Nixon didn't help.
No, he didn't. Except he's always given credit for ending the war, but really it was just that's when we couldn't hold on any longer.
Well, everything that he did was one step forward, two steps back.
Well, I mean, that was his whole presidency.
Yeah, that was his whole presidency, but...
we talked about him last year.
Yeah, and I credit him with... He was a brilliant politician. It's just he inherited a mess that he could not possibly have brought any kind of sanity to.
He didn't have the ability to govern in that time, and he had to govern in that time.
Right, right. And everyone kept asking, what are we doing there? What are we trying to do? And they're trying to
answer, we're trying to stop the spread of communism. It's like, But we don't live there.
And who was it that said in the movie, they were talking about, was it Ho Chi Minh?
Mm-hmm.
Ho Chi Minh early on had believed that, it was afraid that Vietnam was so small and so far away that the United States would never even bother to have anything to do with it.
Right. They thought that we would enter on their behest.
Yeah.
Because they were a colony fighting for freedom, as we
Mm-hmm.
once were. But, and if you were paying attention in the picture, at one point, I think it was Eisenhower, who said, you know, the tungsten and the ore that we all like that we get from there, that dries up. So it was just about the resources that you were stealing from them, and not because of a form of government that was coming in. Okay, I got you. It was just the same. It was the same way as the Second Gulf War, going after the oil.
Initially. And then I think it just became an ego thing.
Oh yeah.
You don't want to pull out of Vietnam too quickly because it looks like weakness to the Russians. And because...
You know what doesn't look like weakness to the Russians? 75 nuclear bombs. Like,
right.
Who can? Okay, so we lose a little standing, but honestly, is it really worth that much?
They apparently thought so.
It's not. I just don't understand. It bothers me, and I've read a fair amount about Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I was born long after its conclusion.
I was born as it was flaming out.
Yeah, but you still had a good 3-4 years before it.
Yeah, but I think about the time my memory, my consciousness was starting to kind of kick in and ending. But I'm going to say something that's going to sound like the most naive thing that I've ever said in my life, and I've said a lot of naive things. I am naive enough to have the confidence in humankind to believe that by the 21st century, we should have evolved to the point that we never needed to go to war with anybody.
Yeah, we should have.
We should have. We probably should have by the 20th century, but we should have probably after World War One. But I know that sounds
it's
really naive, but
it's what should have happened because the people of the world should have been able to come together. Unfortunately, bigotry and ego and
greed,
economics, all that kind of stuff just worked against everything that could have been good about it. And, you know, we talked a little bit about the aftermath of World War I when we talked about the 100th anniversary of the armistice a couple of years ago. And they just wanted to punish Germany. Europe wanted to punish Germany, and that was it. And
they laid the groundwork.
Oh yeah,
for a second World War.
Europe is really good at ending a war in a way that guarantees a sequel. They're like the best franchisers.
Yes, they are.
In terms of war, because they always leave an open ending.
Right.
You know.
Well, we did the same thing.
Yeah.
Because we had Operation Desert Shield, which flares up, and it's immediately over in 6 weeks. Because they're so scared of another Vietnam. We leave the leader in place, which virtually guarantees that 10 years later we're going to go right back into war with them. And we didn't have to, but we did.
Well, we certainly shouldn't have. That's for sure.
But can you tell we're We are not hawks on war, obviously.
Oh, very much not.
This movie is so unbelievable. Like I say, the points of view. There is a lieutenant who returns home at the beginning of the movie, and this guy, Lieutenant Coker, is it Linden, Indiana, I think, and he comes
Lieutenant
back.
Colonel. He's
Lieutenant Colonel
very high ranking.
And he comes back home, and they're all asking him questions about his experience because he was a POW for 6 years, and he comes home, and when you listen to him talk, I was asking you before we started recording. I said, did you get a sense of a programmer in his personality? Because when he speaks to a crowd, it always sounds like he's reading a script that he's memorized. He's talking about...
He kind of talks like Lawrence Harvey in The Manchurian Candidate a little bit.
I thought that too. He's speaking to this delegation. He's speaking to a group of school kids.
Yeah.
And they ask him, this kid asked him, what was Vietnam like? Or what did it look like? And
he said, "Oh, it was really nice if it weren't for the people, because they're a backward and primitive people, and they just mess everything up."
He says this to school children.
School children. So, I mean, that is horrifyingly racist. I do like how at one point they did talk about the dehumanization of the Vietnamese people. And how the kind of the norm, or what they wanted from you, was to think of them as less than human, saying that they don't put the same value on life like the general at the end, and that's a common thing to do when you know what you're doing is wrong, but you still want to keep doing it. It's why slavery happened for 400 years. It's why it's why so many things take shape.
Because somebody in that 400 years had to be like, this is insane.
It's like, yeah, what are we doing? We're taking people from one place and forcing them to work for nothing in another place.
Because when you don't see people, when you don't see human beings as human beings, or you see them as a lesser being, it is possible to think of them any way you want, and more convenient to think of them any way you want.
And you don't feel guilty about treating them like animals, because in your mind, that's all they are.
Right.
Or slaughtering
because
them like animals.
It's easier to think of people as a collective.
Yeah.
These people are going to do this because it's in their nature to do this. Never thinking about anybody as an individual.
Right.
That's why that statement at the end of the movie, that they think life is cheap. And never looks at the individual, never looks at the father who's mourning his entire family. What about that guy in the movie who lost 7 children?
Yeah.
Who were gassed to death?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess the reason they felt that was because they kept coming after the world's largest army. But we invaded their country. They were fighting for themselves. It would be the same thing if somebody landed over here. Or somebody landed in England. It would be, I mean, it's the same thing.
This whole thing reminds me of, it's a weird segue, but this whole thing reminds me of, I don't remember what was going on. It was an episode of The Simpsons where Homer was trying to burn leaves or something, and he said, and Bart says, is this going to get out of control? And Homer says, no, it's a control burn. As the fence is burning up and the grass and the whole yard is catching fire. That seems to be about the size of this. Is that they wanted it to be a controlled burn, but they wouldn't admit that it was out of control until the whole house was, halfway burned down. Right. It was just, it's in front of everyone's face. But they try to make excuse after excuse after excuse and contain their opinions to, they are this way, they are that way, and try to make an excuse in order to justify all of this.
Right.
That's, to my mind, the whole crux of this thing. You're setting fire to it, and you're saying, oh, it's just a controlled burn. But it's not a controlled burn.
It's not. It's not. It's going to rage out of control.
It did rage out of control.
Yeah, I mean, and even just taking that, analogy and putting it into literal, the guy that had to use somebody's body to shield himself from being murdered by napalm, guy still ended up losing a leg and an arm, I think.
Right.
I mean...
Oh, and what about that guy who kept talking about, they wanted us to go over there and do what we did and then come home and just forget. And they lost and then come home. Well, just forget about it.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to forget about it.
How do you forget? How do you just turn off the fact that you were a party to the murder of dozens of people, probably just in one night?
Mm-hmm.
If you were a bomber or if you were in
right.
infantry, I mean, the people who can just shake that off and go, well, it's another day at the office, are the people who truly terrify me.
And I'm telling you, I'm so glad Trump never had a war to fight. Really. I'm so glad we were not at war at that point. God almighty.
I'm actually surprised that he didn't start 4.
Yeah.
That's what I was banking on. I pretty much figured we were toast as soon as he started pissing around with North Korea. I was like, okay, well, there goes nuclear war. All right.
I was afraid he was going to piss off Russia.
Why, by not doing everything they told him to?
I mean, geez, criminy. You are not, you are not in control of anything. I mean,
I would question.
There's a point at which you just say the cause is lost. I give up.
Yeah. I would question whether that man is in actual control of anything, including his bowels. But
up to and including.
Up to and including, yes.
Can I also mention? I got to segue to this. This movie won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature.
Yes, it certainly did.
And at the Oscars in 1975, they got up and they ironically won the Oscar right before the end of the war, just as the war was about to end. Mm-hmm. Bert Schneider gets up and he reads a telegram.
If I may very quickly, is it in any way possible that Bert Schneider might be Vince Vaughn's secret father? Because holy crap.
You know, it could be. If he lost a couple of pounds and shagged his hair a little bit, yeah.
But the sound of his voice was almost identical. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, he gets up there and he reads a telegram from from the ambassador of the Provisional Revolutionary Government in Vietnam, which you would know as the Viet Cong.
Right.
Thanking basically the anti-war movement.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the moment is over, as soon as it's over, He gets off stage. All of the old guard starts typing up this thing and hands it to Frank Sinatra, who runs out there, and it's a note from Bob Hope, who hands it to Frank Sinatra, who runs out there, and basically disassociates himself and the Academy Awards and the telecast and the network from anything that Bert Schneider just said. Frank Sinatra goes backstage and is berated by Shirley MacLaine. John Wayne then berates Shirley MacLaine for this. Warren Beatty comes out and distances himself from Frank Sinatra and anything that's been said since Schneider came out. So there's this comedy of errors going on at the Oscars that year over this statement. And it's the irony, the absolute irony. This takes place on April 8th, 1975. 22 days later is the fall of Saigon.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's why I love the Oscars so much, because this shit happens and it's just...
Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, I sat there watching this the other night, because the first time I saw it, I kept thinking, you ever this ever happened to you? You're watching a movie and you're like, okay, there is something special in this movie, but I'm not getting it. It's like,
yeah, I think so.
And you're thinking, I need to watch this again because there's something in this movie I'm not getting. That's one of the reasons I bought the Criterion. And as I'm sitting there watching it, I'm thinking, this is going in so many different places, in so many multiples of combinations. If it had a straight line narrative, a straight line thing going from the end of World War II to the fall of Saigon, it wouldn't have been as effective.
Right.
This is a movie that gets on the ground with people. The director is sitting on that guy's steps, the guy who was the aerial bomber, who was haunted by what happened to him, who's haunted by the things that he saw. He is sitting down with these leaders, and he's asking them questions that need to be asked. At Walt Rustow, he's like, where did it start? And he's like, well, you really don't want to know that because that's a lot of technical stuff. But if you really want to hear it...
No, do it. And he goes, really? You want to talk about that? I didn't think I would have to go over such pedestrian stuff. It's like, this happened in a vacuum and then exploded.
Right.
The origins of this started long before anybody realized it was starting. Because didn't it say we were helping the French?
Mm-hmm.
We were like paying for 80% of their war against Vietnam anyway, so we just decided to go in.
Ho Chi Minh was a 28-year-old kitchen worker working in Versailles when the peace treaty was signed, ending World War I. And he had come with a petition to give Woodrow Wilson that he wanted his country to be free from the control of France. That's how far back it goes.
Yeah.
And probably even further than that. Our involvement begins after World War II. And they called it containment, this policy of containment, trying to contain Truman's bullshit domino theory. Because that's really all it was a theory that would spread all over, the communism would spread to all the... And it came down to just this war that they got started and could not get stopped. And how many presidents said it's their war? They have to, I think both Kennedy and Johnson said it, it's their war. They have to win it or lose it, but it's like, okay.
It ultimately depends on the hearts and the minds of the people who actually live there.
Okay, so leave it to them.
Exactly.
I
love just the way he said that. The people who actually live there. Like, we don't belong there. But I'm not leaving.
We have no business there.
But we're not leaving.
Isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating?
The hubris of...
Yeah, that's what it was. That's the word that encapsulates the whole thing, hubris.
That's all it was.
And every war that we've fought since has been fought on hubris.
Basically,
yeah. Vietnam, you should know, is no longer the longest war that we've ever fought.
No.
That would be the war in Afghanistan.
That's Afghanistan, yep.
And we didn't technically win that one either.
Don't we still have troops there?
We do. Well, to be fair, we still have troops in Japan and Germany too. So.
True. Just gotta make
wow!
Sure.
This movie is fascinating, and it will leave you with a lot of stuff to think about.
And I didn't expect what I got.
I didn't either.
I expected something that was going to be kind of turgid and dour and look at the awful things that are happening to these people. It just like unrelentingly just show. Yeah, it is. But it's I didn't anticipate them actually getting interviews with government officials.
Right.
And using their own words against them instead of just, here we are in Vietnam. Here we are watching soldiers burn down a village. Here we are watching napalm get dry. You know, it's instead of a laundry list of look at all the terrible things we're doing in this really boring and depressing way, they make it, and they made me angry at everything that had gone on and the way that the people were thought of and the way that these military strategies were implemented. I just started getting mad, and I'm like, that's a damn good piece of propaganda right there. Like,
and they don't do anything really more than show you stuff and let people talk in their own words.
See, that's what hangs a lot of people. Talking in your own words is what hangs a lot of people in this.
Particularly politicians.
Yeah.
This influenced a lot of people, by the way, and a lot of filmmakers. Michael Moore said he became a filmmaker because of this film.
And it shows.
And it shows because a lot of his tactics are in this film.
Right. It feels like Errol Morris got some things out of this too.
You know, I was about to say that. It's like he before he started doing Chipotle commercials, he really started kind of that assaulting interview style, and cutting the interview to those moments, not doing long, boring, and they cut right to it.
Right. This would be fascinating on a double bill with Morris's The Fog of War.
Yes, it would.
That 2-hour interview with Robert McNamara. Oof. Saw that in the theater.
And if you really want to make a triple bill, possibly even Fahrenheit 9/11.
Yeah, that would. It's in the similar vein. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you can believe anything that Michael Moore says.
The thing is, he tells the truth. He just doesn't tell the whole truth. He
subverts a lot of stuff.
He's guilty of lies by lying, but he lies by omission and not by misstating facts.
He's not a reporter, and it shows. I remember Bowling for Columbine.
I love that.
And he starts. He wants to look at the story of a kid who was accidentally shot a friend when he found his uncle's gun, while his mother was off working as a waitress at one of Dick Clark's restaurants. And he interviews Dick Clark, or tries to. And it's like, why? Interview the uncle.
Right, or just because his name is on it doesn't mean he has anything to do with anything. Like,
Right.
he's not the general manager that's keeping this woman at all hours. Like, he's not making those business decisions.
That's kind of when he started to lose me, because I was thinking, okay, that's just bad journalism. That's not, why are
Well,
you doing that?
He's always chasing his Roger and me moment.
Yeah.
And even the Charlton Heston interview in Bowling for Columbine is an attempt at doing that again. That's the most successful he gets after Roger and Me, is the Charlton Heston thing. When he tries to go talking to the people in power, it doesn't work out for him anymore.
What's that Fahrenheit 9/11 when he goes up to try to talk to this politician, and the politician's on the phone? He's like, "No," and he just turns his shoulder and he won't have anything to do with it. But you can see a lot of the techniques that the director uses in Hearts and Minds in his films. The Westmoreland thing. The Westmoreland thing, when he's talking about quote unquote the Oriental and all of that, you can see a little bit of that in Roger and Me when he's got Roger Smith courting his executives, and it's juxtaposed against a woman being forced out of her house.
Mm-hmm.
And she's being evicted.
That eviction scene is really powerful.
The what?
That eviction scene is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see where he gets a lot of his filmmaking techniques from this. This is a hard film to watch. It's a hard film to deal with.
The amount of people you literally watch die on screen is horrifying.
And the amount of bodies. There's a body in this movie. There's a dead body in this movie that falls in the road in the first 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. Well, within the first, within an hour, you watch someone get shot in the head. Point blank. Oh, that is an image that will never leave my mind.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure I'd seen it before, but...
Yeah,
not within the context of what,
But given the times, this was on my mind, and I thought, sorry to drop this on you so quickly, but...
Seriously, man. Jeez.
Thought if anybody would understand it, and if anybody would really get something from it, it would be you.
I appreciate
particularly right now, because like I say, we're 5 days out. We're 5 days away from past the inauguration. Things have been relatively quiet the last 5 days, but
I saw something that said, Joe Biden's inauguration was boring, and I was so thankful for it. Okay, it was boring, and I was happy to see that.
His speech was a standard boilerplate political speech that every president gives on their inauguration. That's it.
Except the last one.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a far cry from American Carnage.
Right.
In 2017. I think that's why, he didn't make anything grandiose, because his job is literally to get us back to where we were before the previous administration screwed everything up.
And that's what he's been doing the last 5 days.
He would like to, I'm sure, move us forward,
Mm-hmm.
but his job is to literally bring us back to where we were at the end of Obama's second term.
Right. And I don't think he can do it.
It's going to be difficult. I
want to have faith.
I don't. The damage that was done in one term will unfortunately take longer than one term to repair.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what happens.
What do we got next week? love that blank look in your eyes, like,
I don't know. I'll let you know.
Stay tuned.
Very potentially after hours, but I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay. That's all I got.
That's all I got. We thank you very much for listening to the Pod Bay Doors podcast. You can find all of our back episodes at the Pod Bay Doors podcast.wordpress.com. You can listen to us on iTunes and YouTube. Hit the like, subscribe, and notifications. You can find us on Twitter at pod_bay. Copy and paste that username over onto Patreon, and that's where we are there. We thank you again so very much for listening, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs, mostly say, "Ooh,